There is a place in the South Pacific where, for most of the year, the nearest human beings are not anywhere on the surface of the Earth at all, but 400 kilometers above it, aboard the space station as it passes overhead. The place is called Point Nemo, and the nearest dry land in any direction is 2,700 kilometers away. I took the real coastlines of every landmass on Earth, along with every settlement that appears on a world map, and measured how far it is possible to get from all of them. And the answer turned out to be almost the opposite of what everybody assumes. The emptiest place on land is not a desert. Half of all land sits further from a major city than most people would believe possible, and yet almost none of it is genuinely far from anywhere at all. Point Nemo sits at 49 degrees south, 123 degrees west, and the three pieces of land closest to it are so small that most world maps leave them off entirely. There is Ducie Island in the Pitcairn group, there is a rocky islet off Easter Island, and there is Maher Island on the coast of Antarctica, and every one of them is more than 2,500 kilometers away. Because nothing lives there and nothing passes through, space agencies use that patch of ocean as the place to drop spacecraft at the end of their working lives, which is why the seabed underneath it holds the remains of several hundred vehicles that were never meant to come home in one piece. The obvious conclusion is that the ocean is the empty part of the planet, and that is true. But far less of it is truly remote than the map suggests. Only 3.5% of all the ocean on Earth lies more than 2,000 kilometers from the nearest coast, and the share sitting beyond 2,500 kilometers, which is roughly the emptiness of Point Nemo itself, comes to just 0.2%. The average point on the open ocean is 733 kilometers from land, which sounds enormous until you realize it is a distance you could fly in 90 minutes. The sea feels endless, mainly because there is nothing in it to give the eye a sense of scale. On land, the picture inverts completely, and this is the part that surprised me most when the numbers came back. The average point on the surface of every continent is only 103 kilometers from the nearest town that appears on a world map. Not a city, not a capital, just somewhere with a name and a dot. 0.4% of all land on Earth lies more than 500 kilometers from any settlement whatsoever, which means that the vast, trackless wilderness of the popular imagination has almost ceased to exist as a measurable category. Wherever you are standing on land, somebody is almost certainly living within a morning's drive. So emptiness turns out to depend entirely on what you are prepared to count as somewhere, and raising that threshold changes the answer beyond recognition. If you only count cities of 100,000 people or more, then nearly a fifth of all land is suddenly more than 500 kilometers from the nearest one. If you only count cities of 1 million, then it becomes almost half the land surface of the planet, and 1/5 of it lies beyond 1,000 kilometers. The same continent that is crowded with villages is close to empty when you ask for a city big enough to have an airport, a hospital, and a university, which is the version of the question that actually decides how people live. The single point on Earth furthest from any city of 1 million people is Henderson Island, an uplifted coral platform in the Pitcairn group with no permanent population and no fresh water. From there, the nearest million-person city is Auckland, 5,542 kilometers away, across open water, which is almost exactly the distance from London to New York. Henderson has forests, it has 4 species of bird that live nowhere else on Earth, and it also has one of the highest densities of plastic debris ever recorded on any beach, because the currents that isolate it so completely also deliver everything the Pacific happens to be carrying. Measured against ordinary human settlement rather than big cities, the loneliest land on the planet is the Crozet Archipelago, a scatter of volcanic islands in the southern Indian Ocean, lying 2,419 kilometers from Tolonaro on the coast of Madagascar. Not far from it sits Heard Island, which is 3,912 kilometers from the nearest city of 100,000 people, carries an active volcano that is the highest mountain on Australian territory, and has never had a permanent resident in its entire recorded history. Both of them sit in the band of ocean between 40 and 60 degrees south, which is the emptiest belt of latitude anywhere on the planet. If what you want is distance from the sea rather than distance from people, the record belongs to a spot in the Zungarian Basin in Xinjiang, at 45 degrees north and 88 degrees east, which is 2,517 kilometers from any ocean in any direction. That is the furthest it is possible to stand from saltwater anywhere on Earth. What makes it interesting is that it is not remotely empty of people, because Urumqi, a city of more than 3 million people, sits just 169 kilometers away, which shows how completely the two kinds of emptiness come apart from each other once you measure them separately. The genuinely emptiest place, if you count human presence at all, is in Byrd Land in West Antarctica, at 73 degrees south and 126 degrees west, which is 1,814 kilometers from Scott Base and further still from anything permanent. More than 4/5 of Antarctica lies over 250 kilometers from any human presence, and nearly half of the continent is more than 500 kilometers from one. It is the only landmass where the emptiness of the popular imagination survives contact with actual measurement, and it manages that only because nobody has ever been allowed to settle it. Underneath all of this sits a piece of geometry that explains why the pattern falls out the way it does. If you pick the half of the planet centered near Barcelona, at 41 degrees north and 2 degrees east, that single hemisphere contains 81% of all the land on Earth. The opposite half, centered out in the ocean near New Zealand, is 89% water and holds less than 1/5 of the world's land between all of its scattered islands. The continents are not spread evenly across the globe at all. They are bunched into one face of it, and everything else follows from that. That is why the emptiest points on the planet cluster where they do, in the southern oceans and the far South Pacific, rather than being scattered evenly around the world. It is also why the deserts people think of as the ultimate emptiness, the Sahara and the empty quarter, and the Australian interior, are nothing of the sort in terms of distance because all of them sit inside the crowded hemisphere, and all of them have towns within a few hundred kilometers. The emptiness is real, but it is almost entirely oceanic, and it is concentrated in the half of the world that most people will never fly over even once. So the honest answer to where the empty places are is that they are mostly not on land, they are mostly in one hemisphere. And the parts of the map that look most abandoned are usually the parts that are best supplied with people. Wherever you are sitting right now, there is somebody within about 100 kilometers of you. And the furthest you could possibly get from every other human being would take you to a stretch of Southern Ocean, where the only company overhead is a space station going past at 8 kilometers a second. Which of these places would you actually want to stand on? And tell me in the comments, because I do read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this, the next video measures another thing that everybody assumes they already know and finds out that they do not.